Context of climate change, where even the Kyoto Agreement that we signed, that the nations of the world signed, which calls for an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Now, when you think about what that means, it means a total change from the way that we've been doing things, including our industries. And it calls for a massive, massive investment in research and development in order for us to make that change. I mean, the world is going to go that way. We're either going to be part of that, or we're going to be left behind. Mexico, for example, exports $2.3 billion worth of photovoltaic panels. And what are we doing? So a $50 per ton carbon tax, that money is going to go into research and development and helping the green economy. It has to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now on to our final.
Technology, innovation, and so on. I think the Conservative government is very much in favor of this. As you know that Prime Minister Harper recently made an announcement to enhance the Parametric Institute at the University of Waterloo, and it was a comment that was made during this election period. But what we need to look at, and the comment we need to make, is that having a lot of scientific research and development, which we have in Canada, is not a very useful thing if all people we train go somewhere else. What we need to do is look at a system of government that provides you low taxes, that lower taxes attracts investment, lower taxes attracts foreign investment. That's the type of position we have to be in to have the economy that can absorb all these scientific research that is done in this country. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to the closing remarks, we have two more questions. Mr. Shiravan, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I would like to thank ICC, perhaps the Persian chapter of the Liberal Party, for this opportunity for question and answers. And for unknown reason, each time I come to the microphone, all of a sudden the camera disappears, the reporters just pack and leave. Coming to the subject of the election, I love it because you guys get here and you ask questions. Secondly, is the price of gasoline comes down. I love that too. And the comments is that, as you have heard, many artists in Canada are desperate for grants and practically live below poverty line, including Iranian artists who have left Iran due to suppression, persecution, and also lack of freedom of expression under the barbaric Islamic regime in Iran, which you heard about that stoning women to death because of their freedom of relationship. Perhaps you know that summer of this year, it was the 20th anniversary of massacre of political prisoners, which we call it Islamic Holocaust in Iran. Coincidentally, in the same time, which was July of this year.
Okay, thank you. You're over your 1 minute, so if you could wrap it up and ask the question.
Okay. There was a show in that regard that there was organized by an orchestra created by some individual and brought lots of so-called artists from Iran, and they used the grants from the Canadian taxpayers, which was supposed to go to the Canadian artists.
Thank you very much. The question then is about funding for the arts.
That is correct.
And
the question is that how come the grant goes to the artists, which has nothing to do with Canada, and our artists are living under poverty line, and these people are represented in the Islamic regime who came to have their show in Canada, in Toronto in particular.
Thank you very much.
The question goes to Ms. Finley in particular.
Thank you, Ms. Hall Finley. Would you like to? Let's ask the second question too, and then we will.
So this question will be very, very brief. It will be slightly directed at Ms. Hall Finley and Peter Kent, if you want to answer the second part of the question. The first part of the question is that the Conservative government in early September agreed to make a change to our foreign aid program to untile our aid, which actually increased our efficiency by about $200 million, which was a very good change that everybody should be very proud of. I'm wondering if the Liberal government is going to continue that. Unfortunately, we saw nothing in the platform that was released last week by the Conservative government that elucidates how you're going to spend $4 billion of taxpayer money on foreign aid. I'd love to get your opinion on what that's going to look like.
Okay. The gentleman here has been asking to ask his question. So that means 3 questions. So this last round is going to be 3 questions before we go to closing remarks. Go ahead, please, sir, and make your question concise if you can.
Good luck to everybody. I just wanted to ask you that you all know about the murder of photojournalist Canadian Zahra Kazemi. Her mother told me that she was raped, her rib cage was broken, her breasts were burned. Now, what are you going to do about this, any of you, if you get elected? And a question directed to Ms. Finlay. Are there any channels for the electorate that if a candidate promises something and they want to impeach him or her, are there any channels to follow up for the people or not? And what do you promise to do about the case of Zahra Kazemi?
Thank you very much for that question. So we've got 3 questions on the table. The first one is about funding for the arts. The second one is foreign aid. And the third is about the late Ms. Zahra Kazemi. Mr. Kent, go ahead, please. Take them in sequence, 30 seconds each if you can.
Well, first of all, the Conservative government has, despite the Toronto Star's version of the story, actually increased funding to Canadian cultural organizations by 8% over the last Liberal government. The programs which have received the headlines would include the sort of situation that you described. Funding for the arts, besides those that are distributed through the Canada Council and the other major arts organizations, is a very competitive process. And the Conservative government has decided to review $42 million worth of arts funding, which would include the sort of inappropriate or less appropriate projects in favor of bidding on projects which, as you suggest, might be better used by artists domestically. With regards to coming to the foreign aid question, how to, and thank you for the compliment on the unlinking or untying of that foreign aid, how will the Conservative government better spend $4 billion in foreign aid? It will be spent smarter. It will be spent, as we have seen in any number of situations around the world, if I have anything to do with it, with fewer situations where CETA hands the money over to foreign agents, NGOs, and charitable organizations, where that money is very often misdirected or redirected to purposes other than originally designed. And I would certainly support a shake-up within CETA to make it more diligent in the way that those billions of dollars are directed and spent around the world. With regards to the Kazemi murder, it was a vicious murder. The Liberal government of the day dithered for months and years after Ms. Kazemi was murdered. What the Conservative government has done is has spoken up at the United Nations, resolutions have been passed, and we are still attempting, the extradition process continues to try and get the notorious Tehran prosecutor, Saeed Mortazavi, extradited to face charges in an appropriate criminal court outside of Tehran, outside of Iran.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hall-Findlay, if you could take those 3 questions.